What you believe about yourself and what you believe about the world is almost completely influenced by the state of your nervous system. Welcome to my video series on how to understand and regulate your nervous system. All of the information in the series builds on each other, so if you haven't yet, please go watch the first 2 videos and meet me back here in 20 minutes. After this, the foundation will be set and we'll be able to start learning how to regulate. Hi, I'm Gabby, and these last 2 weeks have been an absolute disaster for my nervous system. My nervous system is incredibly reactive to YouTube because I really care about my channel. And I also completely understand that anybody who talks about gender online is assumed to be a grifter until proven innocent. But I still am terrified of people thinking that I'm creating this channel in bad faith. Every time I post, my nervous system experiences that as like walking up to a giant hornet's nest and kicking it. And I never know if hornets are going to come out and sting me. And if I didn't know that my nervous system was influencing my perspective, I would just believe whatever story that my body was telling me in those moments of fear, and I would never post again. But because I understand this framework really well, I can anticipate what I'm going to feel. So instead of reacting to my intense emotion, I've learned not to trust the stories that I tell myself when I'm outside of the green. Let me walk you through the last little bit of my life. So I thought that I had this great idea for a video. I wanted to talk about how I used to mostly notice male violence and male misbehavior, but over time, as I started to look at the world outside of the lens that men are the oppressors and women are the oppressed, I started noticing instead all of the good that men do. In that video, I said something like, "Now I see and appreciate the men who go out of their way to protect and provide for others." I communicated that idea so poorly that it sounded like I was saying, now that I see men doing things for me, I've decided to care about them. But that is not at all what I meant, and it's actually the exact opposite of what I believe. But I got carried away with the narrative arc in my head, and I didn't pause to think about how what I was saying might be interpreted as dehumanizing, especially to men who already feel unseen or undervalued by our culture. So when I got the first few comments on my video, I totally panicked. My nervous system went straight into a freeze response, and I stayed in that freeze response for a few days, and then eventually I just took the video down. I was like, don't mind me, everybody. I'm just gonna be hiding under the couch for the foreseeable future. And then a bunch of people started reaching out to me being like, hey, where did that video go? You should put it back up. And then suddenly I felt like I was being chased, and so I went back into the yellow. And so I just reposted the video again. And then I spent like 3 more days just completely panicked. I went into a flight response and just was trying not to even look at my YouTube channel. But luckily throughout all of this, I could tell how dysregulated my nervous system was, and I was aware that I was not able to see the situation clearly, and it was necessary for me to communicate to my nervous system and my body that I'm safe and to get back into the green. So I spent about a week away from my comment section and did my rituals to get back into the green, and then from there I could see what happened from a more grounded perspective. Here is how I assessed the situation from a green state. I created a video where I wasn't clear in what I was attempting to convey, and that caused pain to some people who had trusted me. That sucks. I'm disappointed in myself, but that's the truth of the matter. When I was in the yellow, I was like, I should just never do YouTube again, and I'll just pretend that I've never started a channel and that nothing ever happened, and if anyone ever brought it up in my real life, I would just gaslight them and be like, what's YouTube? Never even heard of it. When I was in the red, I was like, I should just change my name and move to Guatemala. But in the green, I was finally able to stop seeing the situation as a threat and realize that this was actually a cool opportunity for my own growth. And it's an opportunity to face myself and build trust with people who watch my videos. And maybe it was okay that this happened because it could be meaningful for people to hear someone admitting that they totally messed up and make a commitment to not contribute to the poisonous narrative that men are only worth something if they are sacrificing themselves for others. That is what this nervous system series is about. It is not just about regulation. It is liberation from the narratives that our nervous systems create when we are in a survival mode. You can control the stories that you tell about yourself and about the world when you're able to understand and regulate your nervous system. Okay, good work, guys. Let's finish building our ladders. I've taught this lesson so many times, and this is the pattern that I've noticed for what it takes to get to mastering, understanding, and regulating your nervous system. I think this progression also applies to literally any self-development skill. We start at awareness, then we move to understanding, application, personalization, and then we end at mastery. This is our final piece of understanding. Next week, we're going to move to application. Also, I have a little free worksheet. It's in my link tree in the description. It's called Polyvagal number 3. If you'd like to fill it out as we go, if you like having information organized in the same way that I do. Also, if you'd like to contribute to my channel, I've left a link there as well. That will allow me to make videos faster. And if you choose to contribute, I'm so happy to give a thoughtful answer to any questions that you may have. Just feel free to send them to my email. And I'll keep it totally anonymous. Thank you. Once again, your nervous system state doesn't just influence how your body feels, it also influences how you think. What you believe about yourself, what you believe about other people, and what you believe about the world. So as we go through this, take notes of your answers. I know for myself, when I am in the green, I am competent and I'm allowed to make mistakes. The world is interesting and exciting. People are understanding. In the yellow, I am scared, the world is out to get me, and people are mad at me. In the red, I am trapped, the world is broken, and people don't want anything to do with me. The story that you tell yourself about any situation is determined by the state of your nervous system, and that state gets reinforced by self-talk. My self-talk in the green is great. It's really easy for me to practice stoicism. In the green, I'm like, the obstacle is the path. In the yellow, I'm like, the obstacle is chasing me with a knife. And in the red, I'm like, the path doesn't exist, it's only the obstacle. Which totally makes sense. If I am to ask this gazelle how he feels about the world, he's not going to be like, you know, it is really beautiful outside. He's going to be like, I'm not okay, I'm going to die. And so if your nervous system gets stuck in that state, your beliefs will get stuck in that state too. In the first video, I talked about how this animal has the ability to shake out that trauma. But if that gazelle had a system that was more like a human, it could be running around even 2 weeks later and still be like, I'm not okay, the world is bad, I'm going to die. One thing that really drives me insane about pop psychology is this idea that it's like, oh, you only need to think differently about your circumstances. Like, just focus on the good. That works, but only if your nervous system is regulated. If it's not, then your brain's just going to reject that. If someone's in the red or the yellow, it's like trying to tell them to enjoy a picnic when a serial killer is on the loose. Like, they're not going to. This is something that's very common with men that I work with. I have a lot of men who are like, no, I just need to like tough it out and get through it. And I'm like, you totally can do that. But what you're doing is you're driving with the parking brake on. So why don't we take a second and learn how the parking brake functions, and then we can learn how to turn it off, because that will make driving a lot easier and less painful moving forward. So on the second piece of this, we're going to write down what our self-talk looks like in each of these states. In the green, I'm like, okay, I'm doing okay. It's okay if I make mistakes. Everything is figure-outable. In the yellow, I'm like, I am stupid. I am weird. I am embarrassing. And I think about every single embarrassing thing that I've ever done starting in like the 2nd grade. In the red, I'm like, I'm going to fail no matter what I do. So why should I even try? I just need to shut down and give up. So that is your final piece of awareness for this week. So finish filling this out and log your beliefs and self-talk in each state. Collect this data. It's really important. And for extra credit, start observing nervous systems in other people, whether that's online or in the real world. Watching politics through the lens of the nervous system is so interesting because you have one person being like, here's a policy idea, and the other person being like, death is imminent. They're often not actually arguing about the issue. One person's just trying to convince the other person that they should be afraid, and the other person is either not being afraid or being afraid of something else. No one actually talks about the issues anymore. One of the things that makes Joe Rogan so unique is that he's always regulated. Someone will come on his show and say, you need to be afraid of this. This is terrifying. And he'll be like, that is interesting. And meanwhile, the guest might be completely dysregulated, trying to pull him into their dysregulation. But even if he does recognize the threat, he doesn't get activated. He'll be like, this reminds me about aliens. Even when he does perceive a threat, he stays in the green. And I think that's a huge piece of what makes him such a powerful force in our culture. So that is it for today. Next week, we're going to begin regulating. Thank you so much for watching, and I will talk to you soon. Are the things that we say in moments of vulnerability always the truth? Because the heart will say, if I open up, you'll judge me, and I'm afraid of that. Whereas the mind would say, why should I care if you judge me? That's not going to change how I live my life. This is such a good question that I'm just going to answer one today because I could spend hours on this. And I think it's one that a lot of us wrestle with. So I'm going to try to explain how to think about this. The movie Inside Out was a gift to therapists everywhere because it shows what's actually true. You are not one singular voice. You are a system and you have multiple parts. And sometimes those parts completely disagree with each other. So in this question, one part is saying, I'm afraid you'll judge me. And another part is saying, I actually don't care if you judge me. It's not going to influence how I change my life. They're both speaking, but from very different places. So let's talk about two of the kinds of parts that show up in moments like this. First, we have our past selves. Our past selves remember what it felt like to be rejected or humiliated or shamed. They show up to remind us what that pain felt like. They're often scared and hesitant, not because they're weak, but because they remember the pain. And then we have our bodyguard parts. These bodyguards are our defenders, and they show up to protect our past selves. They do not care if you're in a safe environment now. They made a promise to our past selves that said, we are never going through that again. We are going to avoid that pain at all costs. Let me give you an example from my life. So typically when I'm helping a man kind of determine what they want to do in their future, and we're talking about maybe a new career path, we often talk about like, oh, what if you went back to school? Or what if you took a class? And what almost always happens when I bring that up is that I accidentally poke a past self. And instantly the bodyguard shows up and he's like, nope, I'm bad at school. I can't learn. That is just not me. And in my head, I'm like, my guy, like I've been working with you for months. I know for a fact that you are great at learning. You've picked up on everything that I've taught you almost instantly. You are sharp. But I always expect this reaction because school was such a terrible experience for so many boys that it left them ashamed or discouraged or humiliated. And that pain created a part of them that still lives inside of them. And the bodyguard made a vow to protect that past self, to be like, he will never feel that powerless again. So when they push back on the idea of school or class, it's usually not actually resistance, it's protection. It's loyalty to the part of them that was hurt. And when that happens, it's always my job to communicate with the bodyguard and be like, hey, he's grown now. He has tools, he has support, he can keep himself safe. And once that bodyguard part feels that the adult version of this man is strong enough to lead, then the bodyguard can step back. Then I can help the past self understand, like, you didn't deserve what happened to you. You weren't dumb. You didn't fail the system. The system failed you, and you deserved better. And once they realize that they never have to be in a situation like that where they're that helpless again, and they're no longer a kid, they can stand up for themselves. They don't need the bodyguard to protect them anymore. And once that happens, they can then, as the adult self, make the decision about going back to school. That is where the inner leader comes in. That is what I call the part of you that listens to all of the voices, the past selves and the bodyguards and the skeptical parts and the hopeful parts, and then decides how to move forward. And I'll continue with my metaphor because it's accurate when we're just speaking about the nervous system. This internal leader is your internal Joe Rogan. He's hosting the conversation, asking good questions, letting everyone speak, but he knows when to call BS. He knows when to lean in. Healing is what happens when you stop letting a part take over the show, and you can show up as the leader to make the final call. And understanding your nervous system and learning how to regulate is how you can consistently access that leadership. Because when you're dysregulated, your inner leader goes offline, and often the loudest part takes total control. So going back to our original question, sorry, we took the scenic route, it's not about which voice is true. I would instead ask which part is speaking, and what is that part trying to protect? When you're vulnerable, the part that's speaking might be a past self. It might remember being judged or rejected or humiliated and say, nope, opening up is dangerous. We've been there before, let's not do that again. And that's true for that part, but it might not be the whole truth of the reality. Then we have the voice saying, why would I care if you judge me? I would be curious if the voice saying that is a bodyguard. So both voices are telling the truth from where they sit and from where their perspective is, but it's not necessarily the full truth. When you feel really strong or conflicting emotions, that is your cue to pause, to regulate, to zoom out and ask, which part of me is talking and who do I want to listen to? Get super curious, track your nervous system, and let your inner leader gather all of the input, but you make the call. Because the goal isn't to figure out which voice is correct. The goal is to build enough inner leadership that you can hear all of the voices and decide who you want to listen to. You get to decide which voice is true.